Forgot everything about Breaking Bad in the 8 months it's been off the air? Here's all you need to know to jump into Season 5. Cold open! Walter White careens through the New Mexico desert in a busted RV. Bodies on the floor and a kid passed out on the dash. No pans in sight. So far, so bad. 3 weeks earlier, Walt celebrates his 50th birthday with his pregnant wife Skylar and his cerebral palsy-suffering son, Walt Jr. Walt's DEA agent brother-in-law, Hank, tells Walt about his latest meth lab bust.
How much money is that?
About 700 grand.
Though once an almost Nobel Prize-winning chemist, Walt now teaches high school chemistry and moonlights at a car wash where he collapses and is diagnosed with inoperable lung cancer.
I'll live maybe another couple of years.
Accompanying Hank on a bust, Walt sees former student Jesse Pinkman escaping from a meth raid. That night, Walt makes his proposal.
You know the business, and I know the chemistry.
They raid the school, buy the Winnebago, and head out to the desert to cook. Jesse attempts to sell the unbelievably pure product to Crazy 8, who insists on accompanying them to the desert, where tensions rise. Walt rises to the occasion and poisons the dealers with chemistry. Crazy 8 survives the gassing, and Walt and Jesse deal with the bodies, which they both screw up. Despite bonding with his prisoner, Walt learns that dealers aren't to be trusted and takes care of his problem. Jesse continues to use, and Hank discovers their cook site. Walt comes clean with his family.
There's something I have to tell you.
About his cancer, at least. The cost of Walt's cancer treatments begins to add up. Walter returns to Jesse.
Wanna cook?
They cook and bond.
Cancer. You got it, right?
And an errant respirator leads Hank closer to Walt. Walt urges Jesse to sell their product to Tuco, the straight-up crazy new supplier in town. After Jesse's attempt lands him in the hospital, Walt symbolically shaves his head and gets his money from Tuco. With chemistry! Promising Tuco way more product than they have the materials to make, Walt and Jesse steal a large quantity of methylamine. The two deliver the goods to Tuco, who responds with violent insanity, obviously. Watch out, Mr. White. Season 2. First, this weird black and white shot of a teddy bear in a pool. What? After watching Tuco gleefully off his own man, Walt and Jesse decide to poison Tuco with ricin-laden meth, but Tuco's completely irrational insanity works in his favor when he kidnaps them first. Holing up at his incapacitated Uncle Tio's home, Tuco enjoys the non-poison meth and tells the partners his cousins are coming to smuggle them to Mexico. Skylar, with Hank's wife Marie, enlists Hank to look for Walt, who in turn tracks Jesse's car, still suspecting him to be Walt's weed dealer. Tio spoils the poison plan, Tuco goes nuts, Jesse bashes him with a rock, Hank shows up just in time to finish the job, and Walt and Jesse flee into the desert to avoid the DEA. Walt fakes an amnesiac fugue state to cover his tracks, Hank interrogates Tio, but doesn't get far. Jesse's money is confiscated and his parents kick him out of his house. Walt turns his back on Jesse.
Your problems are just that, your problems.
Jesse makes off with the Winnebago, which enrages Walt.
You are a pathetic junkie.
Tensions boil over, but resolve.
Want some breakfast?
Jesse meets Jane, his new landlord and soon lover. Jesse and Walt cook, and Jesse sets up a distribution scheme that he has trouble enforcing.
I want you to handle it.
Jesse recovers the money from the junkies and terrible parents who stole it, with a little help from an ATM. Walt parlays Jesse's street cred into expanded territory,
Corner the market, then raise the price.
and grows into his drug dealer persona.
I'm Heisenberg.
Skylar takes her old bookkeeping job under Ted Beneke,
Is Mr. Gravian still there?
and Hank's new assignment proves explosive. After Jesse's buddy Badger gets arrested dealing Walt's goods, Walt and Jesse retain skeezy lawyer Saul Goodman.
You don't want a criminal lawyer, right? You want a criminal lawyer.
Legal fees draining their supply, Walt and Jesse cook for 2 straight days but end up stranded in the desert. After airing grievances,
I have it coming.
Walt repairs the RV and saves them. With chemistry! Walt's cancer is in remission, but his business is in decline. Saul puts him in touch with a low-profile businessman who will buy their product in bulk. Meet
Can I help you, sir?
Gustavo Fring. Skylar gets closer to Ted, who's keeping secrets too.
Nearly $1 million of undocumented revenue.
Jesse's drug use almost spoils the deal with Gus and sends Jane into serious relapse. Skylar goes into labor the moment Walt needs to deliver 38 pounds of meth to Gus. Walt makes the deal but misses his daughter's birth. Jane blackmails Walt for Jesse's share of the money. Walt returns to Jesse's apartment to make amends, but chooses not to intervene as Jane suffocates on her own vomit in a heroin haze. Harsh, Mr. White. Saul hires Mike the cleaner to deal with Jesse's house. Walt checks Jesse into rehab and undergoes surgery, letting slip he has 2 cell phones.
Your cell phone, did you bring it?
Which one?
Skylar leaves Walt after beginning to unravel his double life. Gus learns Hank is Walt's brother-in-law. Jane's father, distraught at her death, accidentally allows 2 planes to collide midair. Muy ominous in the ABQ. Oh, so that's where that bear came from. Season 3. Where the hell are these dudes crawling? A death shrine? A picture of Heisenberg? Muy ominous indeed. Walt's moved out and confesses his second job to Skylar.
I'm a manufacturer.
Then tries to walk away from a $3 million offer from Gus. And the badass cartel cousins get Walter's name from their ever-charming Uncle Tio. Jesse uses Saul to petulantly screw his parents out of their house. Skylar keeps Walt out of his house, and he petulantly throws a pizza on the roof. Walt eventually breaks in and refuses to leave. He attempts to be open with Skylar, which she reciprocates. Petulantly.
I fucked Ted.
Walter reacts predictably. The cousins hone in on Walt, but the Gus connection keeps him safe. Tio, actually Don Salamanca of the cartel, wants revenge on Walt for Tuco's death. Gus demands they postpone until business is concluded. Jesse cooks when Walt refuses and sells to Gus, who pays half to Jesse and half to Walt anyway, attempting to coerce the master back into the game.
I don't believe fear to be an effective motivator.
Walt brushes off Gus's tactic but is swayed by some well-placed words. And Gus's state-of-the-art super lab doesn't hurt either. Walt pushes Jesse out of the partnership and retains Saul for the $3 million deal.
I'm in. You're out.
Walt sets up in the super lab with his adorably overeager lab partner, Gail Bedecker.
This might be the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
Hank, tracing the RV, inches in on Jesse. Walt wises to Hank's pursuit and arranges to have the Winnebago destroyed, but not before Jesse leads Hank right to it, creating a tense standoff and a brief debate on Fourth Amendment rights.
This is a domicile protected by the Fourth Amendment.
Gus reveals to the cousins who actually pulled the trigger on Tuco.
Hank Schrader.
Hank, enraged by the RV incident, assaults Jesse and is suspended. Fearing Jesse's loose cannon state of mind, Walt convinces Gus to ditch Gale and replace him with Jesse. Receiving a cryptic warning, Hank manages to barely survive an attack by the cousins. Jesse, frustrated with his subservient status,
Totally Kafkaesque.
starts skimming off the top. Skylar coerces Walt into paying Hank's medical bills, justifying it with an elaborate gambling addiction lie, and Walt deduces Gus steered the cousins to Hank to protect him.
Thank me and shake my hand.
A delirious Walt forces Jesse to kill a fly. This is a metaphor, people! Jesse strikes up a relationship with Andrea, a girl he tried to deal to in Narcotics Anonymous. Through her, he realizes Gus was behind Combo's murder by way of Andrea's brother, Tomas, the child assassin from Season 2. Skylar proposes a money laundering scheme to Walt and Saul using the old car wash as a front. Walt balks at her involvement, but Skylar reveals she never filed for divorce.
Married couples can't be compelled to testify against one another.
Mike tells Walter that Jesse's revenge scheme will not be tolerated and urges Walt to deal with it.
No more half measures, Walter.
Gus forces a compromise, but when Tomas is killed, Jesse is determined to get payback. And this time, Walter commits to a full measure.
Run.
Gus reinstalls Gale as Walter's lab partner and instructs him to prepare to replace Walt. Realizing he'll soon be expendable, Walter sends Jesse to trail Gale, and, just as Mike prepares to execute him, Walter gives Jesse a fatal order.
Jesse, do it now! Do it fast!
Poor Gale. Season 4. Gus confronts Walter and Jesse in the super lab where he coolly, calmly executes his assistant Victor as a message to the partners. Walt buys a gun for protection, and Jesse descends into a hedonistic daze. Walt decides he must kill Gus, but finds him elusive.
Walter, you're never gonna see him again.
He appeals to Mike as an ally, and gets his answer. Hank's partner passes him Gale's notebook, recovered at the murder scene, leading Hank ever closer to Walter, and eventually Gus. Skylar attempts to purchase the car wash from Mr. Eyebrows himself, Bogdan, who declines and insults her, still bristling from Walt's uncouth exit. Skylar masterminds an environmental inspection scam and scares Bogdan into submission. Jesse's apocalyptic partying gets out of hand, and Mike drags him out into the desert. First assuming he's going to be killed, he learns he's now Mike's assistant. Walt and Skylar grow closer. Walt moves back in, gets drunk, and tells Hank Gale might not be the true mastermind. Skylar accuses Walt of being in danger. Walt disagrees.
I am the danger. A guy opens his door and gets shot, and you think that of me? No. I am the one who knocks.
Walt insists Gus is trying to drive a wedge between them with Jesse's new guard detail. Appealing to Jesse's anger over Tomas, Walter convinces him to ricin poison Gus at first opportunity. We learn Tio killed Gus's partner when they offered to cook meth for the cartel, a grudge Gus still holds. Tensions rise between Gus and the cartel, and between Walt and Jesse. Jesse, Gus, and Mike travel to Mexico, where Jesse learns he's to be the cartel's new, permanent chef.
You belong to the cartel now.
After appearing to have capitulated to the cartel, Gus elegantly outmaneuvers his competition with some poisoned tequila. Gus escapes Mexico with Jesse and brags of his victories to Tio. Meanwhile, Ted is in over his head with the IRS, and Skylar and Saul bail him out to protect their sketchy finances. Walt takes desperate measures to keep Hank from Gus's operation, and is soon told point blank that Jesse's loyalty is the only thing keeping him and his family alive. Walt asks Saul to disappear him and his family, but the necessary money has been given to Ted. Saul reports a hit on Hank to the DEA, and the Whites are taken into protective custody. When Andrea's son Brock suddenly takes ill with what appears to be ricin poisoning, Jesse suspects Walter is responsible until Walt convinces him that Gus must have used the boy to motivate Jesse to kill him. Walt attempts to blow up Gus's car, but Gus remains almost supernaturally one step ahead. Finally discovering one place he can isolate Gus, Walt appeals to Tio's hatred.
An opportunity for revenge.
Tio requests a meeting with the DEA. Believing Tio to have ratted him out, Gus pays him one final visit. And Walt and Gus's deadly face-off ends. Face-off? Get it? Face-off? Face-off. Walt and Jesse trash the super lab, and Walt calls Skylar.
I won.
Jesse reveals that Brock was actually poisoned by
Lily of the Valley.
And where have we seen that before? Walt appears to be on top, but it's always an uncertainty with Heisenberg. Ah, Gotta love the hard science jokes. See you in season 5.